folks. Now, y'all, I done spent a whole lot of time talking about redistricting and the census. I'm not going to give you that whole big spiel, but just know that the census is that survey that is taken every year ending in 0. It gives the government a snapshot of how many people live in your community and what your needs are. And then it will provide you 2 things in response to that census. Well, 3 things. Number 1, it will take from that census report of your community the total population of your community. And once it has the total population of your community and it knows what your community needs, then it will assign money, dollars for your schools, your libraries, your public transportation, so on and so forth. And it will provide political power. Votes in Congress. There are 435 congressional representatives in the Congress, and you get a representative for your state or any number of representatives for your state based on that census total population count. So y'all be saying, I believe black people is more than 13-14% of the population. We probably are, but if you don't fill out the census, then we ain't gonna know. And if you don't fill out the census, then you are less likely to be properly given access equitably to the electoral power vis-a-vis the process known as redistricting, where they draw political maps based on population. Joining me right now is somebody who knows a lot about this and the capacity for redistricting to essentially either empower your vote or nullify your vote if done with nefarious means. He is Genesis Robinson, Executive Director of Equal Ground, the preeminent Black-led, nonpartisan, nonprofit working group to build a group that is working, I should say, to build Black political power in the state of Florida. Genesis Robinson, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It is indeed a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and to have this conversation about the very important topic of redistricting.
Yes. And so did I, by your understandings, did I misstate anything there? I do a lot of redistricting work, and sometimes I rattle things off in my head quick because I assume everybody knows. Is there anything that we missed in that retelling of what the general layout of redistricting is that you think we need to emphasize? If so, happy to do it now. If not, we can go right into the conversation about what's happening in Florida.
No, I think we can go ahead and get right into it. I mean, obviously, redistricting is super essential. Like you said, historically, we do this every 10 years, but for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, we know the reason. There are those who wish to now do this in the middle of the decade, essentially, by redoing the census. And, we'll get to the merits of why that's a bad idea, but just first, practically, we know that it's not a good idea because even doing the census every 10 years, we still find a way to undercount people. And so for us to think that we can prop up a process, redo this thing, and then potentially redraw districts, and then turn around and do it in 4 more years is just really ridiculous thought.
And one of the challenges that those of us who do census and redistricting advocacy have to face is getting the count as accurate as possible, making sure that people are contacted. And for those of us who believe in an equitable distribution of power, we want everybody to be counted. But Genesis, if I believe in a selfish view of power where only me and mine get to hold authority, then I want as few people as possible to be counted because I want to make sure that the people who are counted are the people who are like me, and the people who are not counted are the people, well, in real life, like you and me, because we Blake. I want those people to not be counted. I don't want minorities to be counted. I don't want non-citizens to be counted. And we saw a lot of this in Donald Trump's first term when he attempted to include a citizenship question on the census. One of the reasons that we found that problematic in the city of New York was because if I'm a congressional representative, I am speaking on behalf of the residents in my district, not just the voters in my district. When we are thinking about school enrollment, we're not just enrolling citizens, we're enrolling residents. When we think about who's going to the supermarkets or who's going to be taking up seats on the public transportation buses or trains, we're not just allowing citizens to access those buses or trains. Everybody who lives in that community is able to access them, and the resources that we get should then, we say, and this is what we say in New York, I don't know how y'all approach it in Florida, but we say if you're going to have to provide services for everybody on the census should be counted, aside from the fact that that's what the Constitution actually mandates. Is that similar to how you all see it in Florida, or is there another view that you all advocate when it comes to your census and redistricting work?
No, that's exactly how we see it. We know that so many resources are tied to the accurate count of the census. Here in Florida, we suspect that about 750,000 people were not counted for. And so when
Wow.
you look at programming, when you look at funding, when you look at grants that come back to the state to support various programs, when you don't accurately account for folks, but then you have all these people in line to receive the services, you end up with less money being in those programs. And so there's a huge voter education piece that has to happen around the importance of the census. Obviously, historically, people don't want to participate for various reasons. They don't want government in their business. They don't want them to know where they live, all of the things that we hear. But the stakes of the census are so great and so
Mm.
enormous. And in a time where people are struggling to make ends meet, where they need resources from the government, it is incumbent upon them to fill out the census so that we can get the necessary funding. So many billions and billions of dollars get left on the table every year because communities simply don't participate, and we have to bring attention to that and correct that problem.
And listen, y'all, we Genesis and I, we're not wagging a finger at people who dodge the census takers or who don't
Mhm.
want to fill out the census. I've said on this show, and I've as a part of my entire census spiel, one of the things I am very sensitive to is the fact that culturally speaking, particularly in the Black community, there is a very credible set of fears around participating in the census. 400 years ago, Genesis, when strangers come knocking at the door trying to find out who inside, that night your entire community could be at the bottom of a slave ship.
Come on
Three,
now.
400 years ago, strangers come knocking at the door to find out how many of y'all are still inside, and half your family could be sold the next day. And we see
Yeah.
even in the 1900s, as my kids like to say, because apparently it's funny to them that I was born in the 19s. Even in the 1900s, strangers at the door, you see an extra pair of shoes in the closet, and you suspect a man lives there. That entire family unit is going to lose access to their social services. And as we just saw the sentencing against one of the officers who shot into the home of Breonna Taylor, when strangers knock at your door today, it might be that type of officer on the other side. So not wanting to give out information about who you are, how many people live here, and what's going on. And this before you add ICE and all this
Yeah.
other sort of
Yeah.
foolishness going on. It makes logical sense, cultural sense that we would
Mhm.
not want to participate in the census. But as I like to say, child, if you running from the feds, they ain't gonna look at the census to try to find you. They got your cell phone,
Exactly.
baby. They got your social security or your social media. They ain't got to use the census for that. But if you don't participate, our communities suffer. We give this example that we like to say in Blacklandia. Let's say there's 100 families and every family got one kid. And according to the census formula for communities of that size, your school should get $100 for school services that year. But if only 40 of you fill out the census, you're only gonna get $40. It's $1 per family. And even though all 100 of you are gonna send your kids to school in September, those kids will get educated, I guess, but on a budget that's only appropriate for 40 of them. So we not wagging the finger, y'all. We just trying to make sure that we have as much civic sophistication as we possibly can. And it really matters because, as you noted, if 750 some odd thousand people in Florida did not fill out the census and were not considered for the purposes of redistricting, not only did you lose out on money, you lost out on some congressional power.
That's
Talk to
correct.
us about what this looks like in the state of Florida, because y'all have been in the news with relation to some of the opinions and decisions and the moves that your governor and leadership are making.
Yeah, well, we're in the news for all the wrong reasons. In 2022, when it was time to redraw the maps, our governor decided to insert himself into the process, and he forced the legislature to pass a map that dismantled Black representation in Congress. As a result of the Voting Rights Act at the federal level, Florida created four Black access seats. Seats where if Black voters turned out to vote, they would be guaranteed to elect a candidate of their choice. And the governor took issue with that. He wanted part of his legacy to be to dismantle that. And despite the legislature initially approving a map that was able to maintain those seats, he vetoed it, and he essentially held the budget over their head. So all of their projects would not be approved until they gave him what he wanted. And ultimately, he got just what he wanted, and they eliminated Congressional District 5 and Congressional District 10, seats that had historically performed for Black folks. And so obviously, we took exception to that. We sued because we were speaking out throughout the whole process, talking about how rigged, how gerrymandered these
Hmm.
maps were. And we spoke out and we took it all the way to the Florida Supreme Court. Yet the court, stacked with people that he appointed,
Right.
affirmed his map and have allowed that map to stand, not only for the last three elections, but moving forward until we redistrict again, which is likely
Wow.
to be in 2030 if he doesn't force it again prior to, like Texas is trying to do.
So this is it's giving post-Reconstruction destroy black political power. It's
That's
giving, oh, we're
exactly what
gonna
it is.
make it a felony to do anything black, and then once you're a felon, you can't vote anymore. It's giving slave suppression is what it's
Yeah.
given to me. What does the fight on the ground look like from your vantage point? Your organization has been doing some amazing work. What does it look like to push back on power when it's being wielded to support white nationalist distribution of political efficacy?
Well, I think we start by education, right? Unfortunately, there's so many people who are caught up with just trying to live and trying to exist, trying to find a way to make a way, that they don't fully understand the implications of this. And so we have launched a massive voter education campaign that we've been doing for the last 4 years. We launched, it's called We Draw the Lines Tour, where we traveled every single part of this state, talking about this case, talking about the importance of redistricting, encouraging our community to care about it because the implications are so great. And so through this campaign, like I said, we've just been really working to try to educate people around this, but we've also been trying to make people realize the connectiveness of these issues to their political power, right? If you will permit me just a second, Ron DeSantis was elected in 2018, where he defeated Andrew Gillum by less than 35,000 votes. All right. In that one
I'm
election,
sorry that you gonna have as much time as you need. I just need to voice how disgusting I think that is because we call him Ron DeSatan, the Nazi DeSantis.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, that
Terrible, right?
stings.
Terrible.
That
Less than
stings.
35,000 votes, right? And then because of that election, you now have a governor who was able to stack the Florida Supreme Court, who was
Mm.
able to eliminate Black congressional representation, who was able to also deliver his party, the Republican Party, an advantage in Congress. Prior to the redistricting, Florida had a congressional delegation that was 14-13, 14 Republicans, 13 Democrats. When this governor got done with this map, he insulated an advantage for his party to the tune of 20-8 because we gained one congressional seat. So when they redid the maps, it went from a 14-13 map to now a 20-8 map. So follow me here. What just happened with the big ugly bill, right? That bill passed Congress by only 4 votes in the House. So had Florida not cemented the advantage for the Republican Party, we would not see a bill that has ripped away trillions of dollars from Medicaid,
Mm.
eliminated SNAPs, ruined the safety net for people who rely on it every single day. And so this is more than just about DeSantis. This is more than just about Florida. This is about a decision that was made and sanctioned by our Florida Supreme Court that will now have ramifications for literally millions of people across this nation because they let this governor get away with what we know is unconstitutional act. In 2010, Florida voters passed the Fair District Amendments where we said we are very clear on how we want you to draw our districts. We don't
Mm.
want you to draw them with the favor to partisanship. We don't want you to draw them with favor to political incumbents, right? We want fair maps. And this court, this state, this governor has just thrown the will of the voters out, and they ignore that and they just don't adhere to what voters passed in 2010 when they passed those amendments.
And this is something that, frankly, that it's not just going to impact us today across the nation. This is generations of political impact and policy making. Because when you think about what happened in Florida and the way that they were able to steal seats there, and then you look at what happened in North Carolina and how they were
Yes.
able to steal seats there, and then we look at this conversation about Texas and how they are attempting to now Texas is already so grossly gerrymandered. I'm like, it's very, very it's a lot to take that they would further find capacity to gerrymander. I saw one proposed map and basically it looked like a kaleidoscope. It just
Yeah,
looked like
yeah,
you would be driving, and then someone had noted that if you're driving in the loop around Houston, you basically were going to be in a situation where you're crossing through 8 different districts at the same time
yep,
or on
yep.
the same drive. And so as much as, we have that happening, at the other side of things, we've got folks on the Democratic side who have up until recently and quite powerfully have said we need to have equitable redistricting. We have seen the rise of independent redistricting commissions that takes the power
Mhm.
of drawing the maps, or at least or tries to limit the power to draw these maps from the hands of the congressional the state representatives who are in power, and instead give it to the people. We have seen that happen in California. We've seen it, I believe, also in Michigan. There are a number of states that have done this work. In New York State, Now we have a redistricting commission, and it's called Independent Redistricting Commission, but it ain't really independent. Like it ain't, and it
Right,
was some bullshit that took place at our
right.
last redistricting round, where basically they had a commission that was made of 5 and 5, so 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and they tried to say there was 2 independents, but come on, son, we knew what it was, and they passed
Mhm.
this bullshit ass map into law. And I take this personally, Genesis, because
Yeah,
when I'm not
yeah.
on these airwaves, I run a law center, and part of the work that we do at our law center is this was our fourth redistricting and census cycle as an institution, and we advocate on behalf of Black New York City residents, and we engage in a coalition. And I'm being fully transparent because I don't want y'all
Mhm.
acting like, well, Lurie, she got a secret agenda. My agenda is very open. I'm very clear about my ain't no secrets here. We gonna be transparent. We advocate on behalf of Black New Yorkers of African descent in the city of New York. We collaborate with groups like Latino Justice, Pearl Deaf, and other groups that represent and speak for the Latino American community in New York City. And we collaborate with the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund and other groups that speak to the needs of the Asian community in New York City. And we do what's called a unity map approach. And we
Mhm.
look at the census data, we look at which communities got greater population, which got decreased, and we say, listen, I know the Asians used to run this block. Y'all don't live there no more. So
Times have
we
changed.
times change. And now the Latinos are there and the Blacks are the next door neighbors. So equitably, if we're distributing political power equitably, we do not need to focus on creating a district where the Asian community is going to be able to dominate in a community where they don't live there no more.
That's right.
And so we do this every census cycle, and we produce this thing called a unity map that says, listen, we know y'all gonna draw the maps. We submitted it to the commission, we submitted to the legislature, and we basically say, based on equity, what is deserved based on total population, this is a map that allows all of our groups to have what it is that we need, and it protects the white folks too, because when there's equitable power, we all get to share. I
That's
have
right.
been a huge proponent of independent redistricting commissions until, and I'm not saying I'm not a proponent, but now that I see how there's some very fugazi moves happening right now, this effort to basically ensure that they will always be able to cheat and lock in power has people like me very concerned about the
Mhm.
limitations that independent redistricting places on Democratic states. Because in the Democratic states, if they're trying to be fair, and in the Republican states, they are cheating.
That's right.
I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions about this. This is something that literally keeps me up at night every time I finish a conversation about census and redistricting.
No, certainly. And I mean, given what's going on in Texas right now, I think that conversation is more important than ever. I think we have to fight fire with fire. You know, it's
Yeah.
time out with all the niceties. We are not living in a normal space, and we need to start thinking about doing abnormal things to get us out of this moment. We can't just act like, this is a normal day, this is a normal process, right? You have people that are literally stealing and cheating and robbing the system despite there being laws on the books that should govern this process. And they say, to hell with it. They don't care about doing what's right. We passed fair district amendments here in Florida with over 60% of voters supporting it, right? That was a bipartisan effort. Republicans and Democrats and independents said, we want our redistricting process to be fair. What did the governor say? The hell with it, right? I'm still going to dismantle Black representation. I'm still going to give a partisan advantage for the people in my party. I don't care. And here's the game that they play, right? They intentionally break the law and they wait if a court, and that's a big if, right? They basically make a bet that if we get challenged on this and if we're forced to change it, we'll do it. But what
Right.
happened? We're now going into 2026. This map went into effect in 2022. So you have 3 elections, right, that you
Mm,
were able to run on an unconstitutional map. So even if the court would have forced them to change the map, that's
right.
3 electoral victories that they were able to have under their belt under an unconstitutional map. And so they know the game, they've rigged the system, they've stacked the deck, and that's just something that we have to start thinking about. How do we view this thing differently? Because we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result.